What a week. Doing the recap of what happened in the markets last week. This is the end of January. So, outside of the Robinhood Gamestop fiasco, there's quite a bit that happened this week. And I'm just going to cover that for a second because I think everybody kind of doesn't understand what happened. And I have a lot of people asking me questions, especially on Instagram. Monday, the market was mixed overall. The NASDAQ hit a record high, and then we had the first inkling or the first situation, let's say, with GameStop, where GameStop surged 602% so far this year. It's up 3,000% year over year. And then it was halted. So essentially what's happening is it's David versus Goliath, Main Street versus Wall Street. There's a group of Redditors. Reddit is, if you guys don't know, it's an online forum, kind of like Facebook groups or, you know, the old Craigslist groups that we used to have or the Yahoo groups we used to have. And a lot of the day trading and finance industry now is on Reddit, and they kind of talk about things and they share ideas, et cetera, et cetera. And so there's a way for you to bet. I don't want to say bet because trading isn't gambling. I've always tried to avoid saying that when it comes to trading. But there's a way that you can speculate on the value of an asset going down. And I'm not going to explain to you exactly how that works. I think I'll do that in another video and kind of get more detailed into that. But essentially, what people can do in the stock market is they can say, well, I'm going to put it in order, and I'm going to say that the stock is going to go down from here. And if the stock goes down from there, then I make money. And then obviously if it doesn't, then it goes up. Now, there are limits to that as well, right? Because, and again, I don't want to get too technical, but essentially when you speculate in a stock to go down, you're essentially borrowing the stock from somebody. You're not just, putting in an order and guessing where it's going to go. You're literally, borrowing it. So if you're borrowing it and you think it's going to go down, but it actually doesn't go down and it goes up, the more that you hold it and the more that it goes up, the more that it's going to cost you because you're borrowing the stock. Does that make sense? And again, if you guys want me to do a little bit more of a detailed video, I'll definitely do that. And you guys that are listening to the podcast, you can either hop on YouTube or go to my Instagram, Marcello Arrambide English. I'll put it here on the screen. You can just look up my name. It'll come up. I have like 10 different languages. But anyway, so what happened is hedge funds have to publicly disclose what they are invested in. It's a regulatory practice based on the U.S. government requirements. So the group of Redditors, or the group of these day traders, actually found some of the most shorted stocks, meaning the biggest position that hedge funds have in stocks where they're betting to the downside. And they all together ran into that specific stop, which in this case was GameStop, and it exploded to the upside. So what happens? There's a short squeeze, which means the higher that stock goes up, the more pressure that hedge fund has to be able to get out of that position. But if the stock goes, remember, higher than the order they placed, they literally get ramsacked. They get hosed. They get in the, if you know what I mean. So this is exactly what happened. Essentially, the Redditors looked at what positions they're mostly getting into, and then they all bet against them at the same time, and they won. So they literally figured out how to play the game against the ones that are normally playing the game against us. Now, I think they're going to come down on this, right? But the numbers are to the tune of, tens of billions of dollars that the hedge funds actually lost. Now, to escalate the situation even further, the situation now is that they didn't continue to let people trade. So they ran up the stock, hedge funds lost and literally went bankrupt, a few of them. And then they just didn't let people put any positions anymore. They just said, nope, you can't do this anymore. And, obviously the speculation is that Citadel, and this is why, if you guys don't remember, I did a video on Robinhood about why Robinhood is the biggest scam in the industry. They literally destroyed, in my opinion, retail day trading. And I could do, if you guys want me to do that video as well, leave a comment there and let me know, and I'll do that for you. But essentially, the people that are paying or giving Robinhood the most amount of revenue gave them money, and then the speculation is that they told Robinhood to stop allowing people to trade. It's a big fiasco. So that's what happened. Not only that, but there were other stocks that were not banned, but halted as well when it comes to trading. ABC, BlackBerry, Nokia, in addition to a lot of other stocks that people were trying to run up because the hedge funds were actually going short on them. So that happened on Monday. Tuesday, markets were slightly lower. 84 companies on the S&P 500 that reported their earnings. 86.9% had topped expectations of analysts. S&P 500 is now trading at 22 times the 12-month forward earnings, and a lot of people are starting to get concerned about the bubble. That's why I went down a little bit on Tuesday. Wednesday was far lower. Again, a concern about the valuations of a lot of these companies. There's a lot of concerns about the bubble. Thursday, the market was lower again on the news about the sharp contraction on the economy at the end of the year. We had one of the worst years in terms of economy in I think it was since 1945. I'll give you that number in just a second. And then Friday was far, far lower as well when the situation with the hedge fund and the retail investors escalated. Biggest weekly drop since October. We had brokers left and right not letting people get into positions but only closing them out. So what essentially happened is, since they were getting murdered, since Wall Street was getting hosed by the little guys, they stopped people from buying the stock to allow it to go down, most likely so a lot of these institutional investors, aka the hedge funds, could get out of their positions because, they got to save their billions of dollars. Other than that, GameStop went up again 100% on Friday. It's now at over 400. It's up 1,800% already for 2021 and 9,000% for the year over year. And now the more interesting thing isn't necessarily what happened to GameStop now. Now they're talking about making a run on silver. Because if you guys don't know, I always recommend futures trading, right? Because there's a lot more regulation. There's less fraud. There's less manipulation in the market as well. But there is a level of manipulation in all markets, right? So silver and gold is one of those situations where it's not really reported that much, but it's definitely going down. And now they're thinking about making a run on silver because the amount of money that they bought in GameStop is actually larger than the entire market cap of silver. And if they do that, they can inflict some real damage because, silver and gold are heavily manipulated in the precious metals markets. And that, if they do that, that can cause some damage because banks will go down. Now, the Dow for the week went down 3.38%. The S&P 500 went down 3.42%. The NASDAQ went down 3.61%. And this could be the catalyst of the new downtrend, the new correction, the new retracement that we're going to see from this hyper market. Overseas market news, there's a big report that China last year was the first time that they surpassed the U.S. for foreign direct investment with $163 billion in inflows. That's a big piece of news because that means that essentially more people overseas are investing more money in China than in the U.S. We're kind of getting that, that kind of switch. European markets overall were lower for the week. The FTSE in London was down 4.29%. The Istanbul market, even though it's kind of, one foot in Asia, 1 foot in Europe, went down 4.68%. Latin American markets mostly lower as well. Canada went down 3.11%. For all of you Canadians, don't you know? Africa and Middle East, Nigeria went up 3.44%. Asia and Australia went down. Indonesia, the biggest loser there, at 7.58%. Bitcoin and cryptocurrency news. Tesla, richest man in the world now, the founder Elon Musk, mentioned on his profile something about Bitcoin, and there was a huge speculation about it. He's actually an investor in Bitcoin now. On that news, literally minutes later when he did that, it spiked 15%. It's the biggest intraday move in a year. And then for the year, it went up 4.10% to $34,508.70. And the virtual currency Dogecoin, which ended up as a meme, actually went up 373% in the last 24 hours. At one point, it was up 613%, and it settled at about 4.0469. Commodities, crude went up 0.24% to $52.20. International crude, which is called Brent, went up 1.23% to $55.88. And oil prices remain at one-year highs. Prices in metals, precious metals, went up, especially on Thursday, due to the situation where, Thursday and Friday, I saw a huge run up and then a run back down about what's happening in these rumors where the Redditors now are going to go after the silver markets. Overall, for the week, gold went down 0.41%. Closed at 1,849, while silver went up 6.02% to 27.08. And in financial and banking news, Forex by far is the largest finance traded market in the world at $6.6 trillion, reported by the Bank of International Settlements. If you don't know who that is, essentially think of it as the central bank for central banks, right? They're centered in Switzerland. That'll probably be the bank of the new world currency, all that stuff. Now, New York and London still account for over 50% of the daily Forex turnover. And remember, there is nobody centrally that regulates Forex. And so there's a lot more manipulation. There's a lot more fraud in the Forex markets than in other markets, for example, like stocks or futures. That's why I recommend stocks and futures for beginners. Global foreign direct investment, or FDI, collapsed in 2020. It dropped 42% from $1.5 trillion in 2019 to an estimated $859 billion. That's 30% lower than the lowest point that we had in 2008 and 2009 crisis. And most of it was in developed countries, where it dropped by 69%. This is big news, right? I know I kind of throw out a bunch of numbers out there sometimes, and I try to tell you guys what it means instead of giving you the actual numbers and percentages. But essentially, the whole world runs on foreign direct investment, right? There's very few countries, for example, Japan has a lot of debt, but they mostly run on internal debt because they're big savers. Places like China, everywhere else, we kind of have this global economy now. So if there's not a lot of foreign direct investment, or it collapses, the world economy essentially isn't doing as well. This is to be expected in 2020, but this is a pretty big hit from all angles when it comes to the global economy. Germany's second largest bank now, Commerzbank, is planning to cut its workforce by 10,000 people. Remember all the problems that Deutsche Bank had as well, which is the largest bank in Germany. Little hints there. You can see problems with the financial system just in time for government coin. Other than that, they're closing 340 branches in 2024. And in Germany, inside of Germany, they're literally shutting down about 1 out of 3 jobs. So much for a recovery. Political news: the U.S. House is delivering an impeachment trial against former President Trump to Senate on Monday. I was going to say Monday. I missed the Y here on my notes. Anyway, it's going to set the stage for a February 8th trial, with 5 Republican senators voting for. The process is if it's even constitutional. There are 17 Republican senators that are likely not to vote for the impeachment. So if those 17 Republican senators don't vote for it, essentially this whole process is a wonderful use of our taxpayer money, because it's not going to go through anyway. Italian Prime Minister Conte resigned on Tuesday. It's going to try to lead a new mandate for the Italian government. And Ukraine is launching a criminal investigation in attempts to be able to investigate the interference in the November 2020 U.S. presidential election, to be able to go ahead and try to attempt to not damage further relations between the two countries, the U.S. and Ukraine. In economic news, despite the great growth in quarter 4 of 4%, the U.S. economy fell 3.5% in 2020. The date was 1946. That's the worst result since 1946. Other than that, it has to do a lot with the quarantines. Government shut mandates, and now if you guys saw the news as well, a lot of the left-leaning states like New York and California and Michigan, they're all starting to reopen again after the election, even though the coronavirus numbers and cases are actually going up in those places. U.S. consumer spending is accounted for over 2/3 of the U.S. economy. It's actually close to 70%. It fell for the second straight month, 0.2% in December. This has to do with renewed business restrictions due to the COVID lockdowns. So again, not good for the economy. Corporate news, Apple hit a new record intraday high at 145.09. Monday it surged, or closed, I should say, at 2.77%. Microsoft exploded with their earnings and their revenue. They went up quite a bit on when they reported the news. They reported $3 billion in a quarterly revenue, which is a 3-month record, and they posted a 17% increase to about $15.5 billion in income. Shares of American Airlines Group, the most shorted U.S. carrier, that's another one of the Redditors are going after, surged 60% in pre-market trading. They're going after them all. And watch it. It's not going to end well, because obviously we can't win the money if the billionaires are losing, right? That's not allowed. They went up 13.89% in mid-morning trading after surging over $21. And Tesla also ended Thursday with a negative result of 3.32% after investor earnings disappointment. Despite strong profits, the Q4 adjusted income of $903 million, but they forecasted $1.1 billion. So people were a little upset. They're also upset that they only made $270 million in net income rather than the amount that they predicted that they would make, which is $780 million. In trade news, frozen food is being diverted to South Korea, while China is having a long delay in their ports after they're testing a lot of frozen fish for COVID to make sure that it doesn't enter the country. And China's demand for soy is draining U.S. inventory so rapidly that American processors might have to buy more soybeans from other countries like Brazil due to the fact that, they're literally running out of it now. So we went from too much to not enough with what's happening in the world. Technology on Sunday, SpaceX launched the Falcon 9 rocket with 143 satellites into orbit, which is the record. A new world record for the most satellites launched by a single rocket. The mission is known as Transporter-1. It carried 10 satellites for the SpaceX Starlink internet network. I don't know if you guys saw, there was a guy that I read in the news. He went into the middle of a national forest with no cell phone connection, and he had download speeds, gigabyte. I mean, we're talking just insane internet speeds. It's going to be really exciting when that launches to everybody. Largest U.S. automaker, GM, plans to be carbon neutral by 2040. It wants to offer only electric vehicles by 2035, and also wants to be able to offer only battery electric vehicles in addition to other zero emissions technology. It's going to require an investment of $27 billion instead of what they thought would be $20 billion before the pandemic. And Tesla, I don't know if you guys saw the new Tesla Plaid version, Model S, first vehicle to go 0 to 60 miles per hour in under 2 seconds, beats exotic cars like Lamborghini, Ferrari, and Bugatti. You got to give this guy credit. It's 1,020 horsepower with 3 electric motors. Insane fast. In investment news, Europeans for the first time received more energy from renewable energy than fossil fuels in 2020. They got 38% of their energy from renewable sources in comparison to 37% of fossil fuels. One of the things that's really interesting to me is that there was, you guys should look this up. Just Google the year without a summer. There was one volcano in Indonesia, if I'm not mistaken, it was Krakatoa, that ejected so much plume in the air that it literally created a situation, a blackout effect from the sun. And the next year was known as the year without a summer because a lot of people had problems growing food because the sun wouldn't come in. I'm interested to know that if they're going to sit there and convert to renewables, solar and wind and everything, what's going to happen when something like that happens again? They're not even going to have a backup. I think it's a big mistake. They should at least have a backup where they can run the factories and turn them on, but they're most likely going to shut down a lot of these factories. Like Germany, for example, I believe they shut down all their coal plants to be able to go solar. Well, what happens if the sun doesn't come out one year? Things to think about. Southwest Airline, 4th largest airline in the U.S., posted their first loss since 1972. They lost a record $3.5 billion as the pandemic obviously brought air traffic to a halt. CME lumber futures hit a new record high with physical prices following. Prices have surged 30% since January 12th. Obviously, this has to do with the situation where it's low in supply, and also everybody's now at home and they're redoing their houses. So without the supply and a lot of demand, prices go up. And U.S. home prices also hit record highs, strongest home sales in 15 years. U.S. housing gained $2.5 trillion in value in 2020, the most in a single year since 2005. And the entire full stock of U.S. housing is now worth $36.2 trillion. And Europe's conflict with AstraZeneca worsened on Friday as Germany declined to recommend the firm's coronavirus vaccine for older people. With antivirus restrictions being tightened again globally, the UN said that the global tourism industry has lost $1.3 trillion in 2020. The pandemic has now killed 2.2 million people, infected over 100 million, with a lot of countries trying to expedite their vaccination campaigns to be able to get back to what we consider to be normal, because I don't think it's going to go back to normal. Other than that, in international events, the president of Mexico, affectionately known as AMLO, tested positive for COVID-19. He has very light symptoms, he said, but he is already being treated for the virus. And in Singapore's digital contact tracing system, despite previously assurance to the contrary, they're actually sharing information with the police. Who would have thought that would happen? And the new Biden administration is going to reimpose travel restrictions from places like Brazil, Europe, the UK, and now South Africa as well, to be able to try to stop the virus from continuing, especially the new contagious variant from South Africa and the UK. And after the UK's official death toll crossed 100,000 on Tuesday, which is the world's 5th highest overall, creating more civilian deaths than World War II. Prime Minister Johnson announced that arrivals for 22 countries are going to be forced to quarantine in government-provided hotels. That's not creepy. And repeated warnings to not travel abroad, and some people might be sent back from the airport. So they're not going to let UK citizens travel anymore because they say it's not good for you. This is what's coming, guys. And in unusual facts this week, despite a rough year for the automakers, Toyota has once again overtaken Volkswagen in 2020 as the largest automaker of the world. It's the first time in 5 years that they overtook Volkswagen. Toyota's sales fell 11.3%, while Volkswagen dropped 15.2%. But it's expected that Volkswagen's going to retake it in 2021. That's the news for this week, guys. Let me know if you guys have any questions, and we'll see you next week.